Welcome to the IELTS Tutor. IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System. It's a test designed to assess whether students are ready to study at universities or other institutions in the medium of English. There are many test centres around the world. Some of these are listed in the accompanying notes. A candidate's overall ability is recorded by means of a band score from 1 for a non-user to 9 for an expert user. The test consists of 4 sections: listening, reading, writing and speaking. This video package is a world first and has been produced as a result of many years of teaching experience in this specialised field. It presents students with specific help to achieve the required IELTS band score. Our main aim is to make students aware of the skills demanded by the IELTS. It has been thoughtfully compiled to provide information which is not readily available outside the classroom. It is, in fact, your own personal IELTS tutor. Mastering the skills highlighted here is essential to your success. The first subsection of the test that you'll be required to do is the listening test. It takes approximately 30 minutes. There are 4 sections to the listening module. In the first 2 sections, there is a conversation between 2 speakers and a monologue. The final 2 sections are related to more educational contexts. The following are the most commonly used question types: multiple choice, short answer questions, sentence completion, diagram completion, labelling a diagram, classification and matching. The following are some important tips for listening. Number 1, the dialogue is heard only once, but time is given to A, check answers, and B, read ahead. It's very important to try to read ahead so that you have some idea what you'll be listening for before you actually hear the dialogue. When reading ahead, it's a good idea to highlight important key words. Use a highlight pen to do this to make the key words stand out. Doing this will help you to locate the important information. Number 2, when the time for reading ahead terminates, stop reading immediately and begin to listen from the very first words spoken. Don't worry if you haven't pre-read everything. By the end of the section, your ear will be more tuned in. It's very important, however, that you don't get lost at the beginning, as this may mean that you're not able to do any of that particular exercise. Number 3, you'll be given time at the end of certain sections to check your answers. It may be helpful to use this time to read ahead. This will give you more time to prepare yourself for the next section. Checking answers should be restricted to adjusting spelling or making an answer clear and legible. In most cases, it would be unwise to change your answers. So unless you're absolutely sure that you've got something wrong, leave it. Number 4, when answering questions, use abbreviations to give yourself time to focus on the task of listening. Write out the abbreviation in full only at the very end of the test, when you transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Don't waste precious time during the test. Number 5, when listening, try to listen for 2 answers at a time. In other words, don't only listen to obtain information to fill in one question. Rather, listen in order to listen to two questions. This will help you not to get lost. Getting lost is one of the biggest problems facing students doing the listening section. If you're still listening for information to answer question 1 and the speaker has moved on to question 2 or 3 without your realising it, then you're lost and panic sets in. So remember to listen for 2 answers at a time. Then, if you miss the first one, you'll have time to get the second. Number 6. You're usually required to listen to information to fill in a form. If a person's name is spelt out, such as Stuart Gray, that is Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, Gray, G-R-A-Y, then you must get the spelling correct. Be careful of numbers and letters that sound similar, such as A, H, and 8, or letters that sound similar, such as C and G. Also listen carefully for the difference between W on the one hand and double O or double E on the other. Finally, listen carefully for the difference between 80 and 18, or 30 and 13, etc. Number 7. Remember, there's a big difference between listening, say, to the news and listening for information in the IELTS. In the case of the news, you're listening for global or general information. However, in the IELTS, you will be listening for specific information, and you have to develop the skill of reading and listening at the same time. Number 8. The final point to remember is that you must transfer all your answers to the answer sheet. If your answers are not on the answer sheet, you won't receive any marks for them. The second subtest of the IELTS is the reading test. The reading subtest takes about 60 minutes. There are 3 reading passages totalling approximately 1,500 to 2,500 words. Texts for this test may have been taken from journals, books, or newspapers, and they deal with topics that are of general interest and are appropriate to students at academic institutions. The following types of questions are commonly used in the reading test: multiple choice, short answer questions, sentence completion, diagram or table completion, choosing headings for paragraphs, identification of writer's claim, that is, true or false or not given, classification, and matching lists or phrases. In order to achieve success in the IELTS, it's essential for students to develop the following skills: predicting what the article may be about, skimming for global information, scanning for specific information, guessing the meaning of words from the context, and referencing. If you don't use these skills in the IELTS, it will be highly unlikely that you'll get through the material in the prescribed time. The following are some very important points for you to remember and practice if you want to get a good score for your reading. First, use the titles and any subtitles to try to predict the article's general content. Even if your prediction isn't correct, trying to predict will help you to focus on the exercise. This will calm your nerves and allow you to think clearly. Write down whether you think the tone of the article is positive, negative, or neutral, Also, quickly brainstorm some ideas by writing down 2 or 3 words that come into your head on the topic being considered. In the case of the article in your notes entitled "Talk about the weather, forces that govern climate," you could have written negative, storms, global warming and melt. This shouldn't take you more than a minute, so please do it. It's a very important step. Second, another reading skill which you need to develop is skimming. This is done to get a general idea about the contents of an article. We skim for global information. The quickest, easiest and most beneficial way to do this is to go straight to the questions. The questions really consist of a summary of the text. Next, look carefully at any graphs, tables or diagrams which may accompany the article, since they contain large amounts of condensed information. Third, scanning is the next step. You'll now be looking for specific information. There are clue words in each question. For example, question 3 in the sample test in your notes asks the question, "Where was the first outbreak of Asian hemorrhagic fever recognised?" So the clue words are where, a place, hemorrhagic fever, and outbreak. The clue words can be found around line 65. The answer is Manila. Fourth, guessing the meaning of words is another skill you'll have to develop. Remember, it's possible to get a high score for the reading subtest without understanding all the words in the text. You'll often be able to give the right answer even though you don't know the meaning of a word by merely understanding its function in the sentence. Is it a noun, a verb, an adverb, or an adjective? For example, in the article "A global village but still divided," line 8, there's the word chartered. Although most students wouldn't know the meaning of this word, it can be guessed. In the context of the sentence, chartered must be a verb, something explorers did. They did it around the planet. They found out something by doing it. Now, if you had to answer the question, what did explorers not find when they charted the planet? You'd be able to give the answer, mouthless apple eaters, dog-headed people. This brings us to point number 5, referencing. Often words refer to a word from a previous phrase. For example, the article about the weather states, "This process is often compared to a greenhouse." The sentence before tells us what this process is. There's the statement, "This is just the right amount to produce a climate in which life can flourish." This refers to 1/1000th of the sun's outgoing energy. Finally, it's very important that you transfer all your answers to the answer sheet. If your answers aren't on the answer sheet, they won't be marked and you may lose valuable points. The writing module takes 60 minutes and there are 2 tasks to complete. For task 1, candidates need to write at least 150 words in no more than 20 minutes. Candidates have to present information from a graph, diagram or table in their own words. For task 2, candidates need to write at least 250 words in no more than 40 minutes. candidates have to present their point of view, develop an argument, or propose solutions to a problem. A common problem facing students doing the writing test is that they have difficulty understanding graphic information. For this reason, they often spend too long on Task 1. It may be better to start with Task 2, since it carries more marks. Whichever task you do first, remember to stick to the time allotted to each task. To prepare for the test, try to collect graphs from books, magazines, the newspaper, and use the method presented here to practice analysing them. Your success in doing this task will depend on understanding graphic information, using the correct language, which you'll find in the notes, using the right method, which will be discussed on the video, and practice. This is very important, and it's up to you. To analyse a graph. Step 1. Divide the graph into sections. Each section on the graph represents a sentence. This graph has 4 sections, so the body of your answer will have 4 sentences. This graph has 5 sections, so the body of your answer will have 5 sentences. Step 2. Use a highlight pen to mark the highest and lowest points on the graph. This will remind you to use phrases such as reached the highest peak of, or rose to an all-time high of, or perhaps dropped to the lowest level of, or fell to an all-time low of. Please turn to your notes for further information on how to use these phrases. Step 3. Now you're ready to write out your introduction. This may be done as follows. For graph 1, we could say, this line graph clearly illustrates the sale of trucks in Petrie in the last decade. The second sentence may refer to the horizontal axis and vertical axis. So in graph 1, your second sentence would read, time on the horizontal axis is plotted against sales on the vertical axis. Step 4. Now you're ready to write the body of the graph, which is represented by the line. Each sentence in the body should ideally contain 4 elements. Information on the horizontal axis, information on the vertical axis, information represented by the line itself, connectives, words used to join the different sentences. In the case of graph 1, the first sentence of your body could read, as can be seen from 1987 to the end of 1988, the sale of trucks in Petrie rose sharply from about 100,000 units to approximately 450,000 units. As you can see, all 4 of the elements mentioned are in this sentence. Now look at the interpretation of this graph in your notes and notice how each sentence always contains all 4 elements. Practice doing this with any graphs you can find. Step 5. Now that the body is complete, you need a conclusion. Your concluding statement should be a general observation about the overall trend. In this case, you could simply say, the sale of trucks in Petrie reached a peak in 1994, but since then, sales have continued to fall. To analyse a table. Tip 1. In tables, there's always information across the top and information down the side. the information across the top is always analysed in relation to information down the side. So the introduction to this table could be, this table clearly highlights favourite pastimes in a number of European and Asian countries. The pastimes are analysed in relation to a number of nationalities, such as English, French and Chinese. The introduction for Table 2 could be, this table clearly highlights the age of individuals in Jacksonville when they first started gambling. The percentage of persons in 1980 and 1990 are analysed in relation to age groups from 10 to 40 years. Tip 2. Take a moment to analyse the table and, if possible, try to group together sections that are the same or similar. For example, in this table, the USA, Canada and Australia can be grouped together. Also, Korea and China could be combined. Then we could say, as we can see from the table, the percentage of people watching TV in the USA, Australia and Canada is approximately 60%. In these three countries, hobbies are also popular. Interestingly, the percentage of people who like reading is quite low at approximately 15%. Tip 3. Not every part of a table needs to be mentioned, especially if it's a large table containing lots of information. Just bring out points of interest. Tip 4. When analysing a table, you'll need to compare different features or components of it. So you'll need to use comparing words or phrases. The accompanying notes have many of these phrases for you to learn. Tip 5. To conclude, make a very general comment on one or two items that stand out. For example, finally, it's interesting to note that TV is the most popular pastime in all countries except China. This situation may change in the future as China becomes more capitalistic. Tip 6. Notice when giving an opinion, we use words like may. This indicates that the statement made is only an opinion, not a fact. Please check in your notes for further useful words or phrases to use when giving opinions. Besides graphs and tables, you may also be asked to analyse a chart or diagram. You'll find a number of these in your notes. Please study them carefully and answer the accompanying comprehension questions. These questions have been designed to help you focus on the language you'll need to complete this task. Writing Task 2. In this task, you may be asked to persuade, P, offer suggestions, S, compare and contrast, C, give causes and effects, CE, give advantages and disadvantages, AD, and other, O. It's very important for you to make a decision as to which of these tasks you're being asked to do before you start writing. Practice this skill on the following questions. Cigarette advertising should be banned. Discuss. Discuss measures that could be taken to address overpopulation in third world countries. What are the effects on young children of watching TV as opposed to reading? Discuss the causes of the escalation of crime rates in most cities. What effect does this have on society? Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of a vegetarian diet. If you're not sure about your ability to carry out this vital first step in the Task 2 writing question, please turn to the notes and study the section entitled Tips to help you decide on the correct format to use. You'll find some model Task 2 essays in your notes. Use them to practice answering the typical Task 2 questions. Also, use the Critical Thinking Guide, which has been designed to assist you to develop your own ideas about a number of different topics. This exercise is very important and very helpful, so please practice it as much as you can. Let us now consider the speaking subtest of the IELTS. This is in the form of an interview. The speaking test consists of 3 parts. Part 1 takes 4 to 5 minutes. Part 2 takes 3 to 4 minutes. And Part 3 takes 4 to 5 minutes. We will now look in on a speaking test interview.
Good morning. May I have a look at your passport?
Yep.
And your name is?
My first name is Asano, which means wide field or something like that. The reason my parents called me that is because my father just liked the sound of it. My family name is Tamaki. It's not a very common name in Japan, but I think it's easy to pronounce for English people.
All right, Asano. In this first part, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. Where do you come from?
I'm from Japan, Yokohama, which is a very, very big city close to Tokyo. I think the population is more than 3 million. But actually, I was born in China, Beijing, which is a huge city too. And my family moved to Yokohama when I was 3 years old. And I recently applied for the citizenship in Australia because I don't like the huge population and pollution in Yokohama.
So tell me, what do you like about Yokohama?
Well, it's exciting. For example, there are many shops, restaurants and markets and people everywhere.
All right, Asano, now tell me, what are you doing at present?
Well, I'm looking for work. Fortunately, there are lots of vacancies for my profession. I'm really looking forward to working so that I can be independent financially. My parents have spent a lot of money on me.
And what kind of work do you do?
Well, in Japan, I was working for the government as a nurse, but it was a very hard job. And I did that for 3 years. Then I went to New Zealand to study English, and I moved to Australia about a year ago to study for my PhD. And as I told you before, I'm looking for employment right now.
Okay, Asano, now we'll move on to part 2 of the speaking test. Have a look at this, read it carefully. You have about 1 minute to think about your answer, then approximately 1 to 2 minutes to talk to me about what's on the slip. You can use a pen and paper to make some notes.
At this point, you'll need to brainstorm for ideas. This is an example of how you could make your notes.
All right, are you ready?
Yes. Well, I like classical music and also folk music. Classical music is very relaxing, and folk music is interesting because it tells us people's culture or history. But I don't really listen to music much because I'm very busy. I have to work because I've got a part-time job, and I have to shop and cook. And I like to read in my spare time. I usually listen to music in my car because I've got a really good sound system in my car. When my mother was young, Japanese people were just beginning to listen to Western music in Japan. But now, Western style music is actually very popular in Japan. And in fact, a lot of the music that young people in Japan listen to today is in English.
All right, Asano, we'll move on to part 3 of the test now. What influence do you think music has on life?
Well, the effects of music can be good. It helps us to relax and also to enjoy ourselves when we get together. But on the other hand, it can incite feelings of nationalism, and some modern music encourages drug use or violence.
What part does music play in your culture?
Well, in the past, Japanese music was quite nationalistic. It was used to encourage a love for Japan or something like that. But today, people listen to all types of music as they do like countries like in America or the UK. And in future, I hope music in Japan will improve because I don't think it's very good right now.
Okay, how would you define music?
Could you please repeat that question again?
How would you define music?
Well, it's something sounds beautiful and helps us to relax. And it's a part of all cultures. All ages listen to it. And it can be used for both good and bad.
Thank you, Asano.